Alex Carter walked slowly through the wide, glass-domed hall of the Xylaris Academy. The sunlight that passed through the dome made the plants inside glow in colors he had never seen on Earth. Reds, purples, blues, and greens shimmered, moving slowly like they were alive. Alex had studied many dangerous plants on Earth, but the ones here were different. Some had teeth, some had vines that could crush a grown man in seconds, and some released smoke that could make anyone pass out in minutes. This was the final exam in toxic flora. And the hall was full of alien students, all from different worlds. Alex could feel the eyes of many of the aliens on him. Some were staring with curiosity, others with amusement, and a few with something he could not quite read. The aliens here were not used to humans. They often underestimated humans because humans were smaller and not as physically strong as most of their species. But humans had a way of thinking that could surprise anyone. Alex had learned that a long time ago. He walked past the first row of floating terrariums. The plants inside were moving slowly, but Alex could tell they were dangerous. There was a plant that looked like a giant blue flower, but it had long, sharp tendrils inside. One touch, and it could pierce armor. Another plant looked like a small tree, but its roots could crawl over the ground like snakes, and its sap was poisonous to anyone who touched it. Alex felt a shiver of excitement. He had seen many dangerous plants, but nothing like these. At the front of the hall stood the proctor, a 6-limbed alien named Vireth. Vireth was tall, with green skin that shimmered under the sunlight. His eyes were large and black, with no whites. And his long fingers moved in the air as he explained the properties of each plant. This plant, he said, pointing to a glowing red shrub, contains toxins that will dissolve flesh within minutes. Only a trained soldier can handle it safely. Remember, our species uses these plants to prepare for battle. The other students nodded eagerly. Many of them had spent their lives learning to use these plants for war. Alex, however, was not thinking about war. He was thinking about survival. He had seen many worlds where food was scarce, where even poisonous plants could be useful if prepared correctly. He raised his hand, and the hall went quiet. For food or for war? Alex asked, his voice calm but firm. The silence that followed was deafening. The alien students stared at him with wide eyes. Vireth froze mid-motion, his fingers hovering over the terrarium. No one had ever asked a question like that before. In their culture, plants like these were always weapons. They were taught from childhood that toxic plants were dangerous tools, to be used to gain power over others. Alex's simple question had stopped everyone in their tracks. Vireth's head tilted slightly. "Explain yourself, human," he said, his voice echoing in the hall. It was not an angry voice, but curious, almost cautious. Alex stepped closer to the glowing red shrub. "I am looking at these plants and thinking about survival," he said. "A plant that can kill could also be a plant that feeds. If you know how to prepare it, you can eat it safely. You can survive on a planet where nothing else grows. So I ask, are we learning about these plants to destroy or to live?" Murmurs spread through the hall. Some aliens whispered to each other. Some laughed quietly, thinking he was naive. Others frowned, confused. One small alien from a distant world, with pink skin and 4 arms, whispered, "He speaks as if life matters more than power. How strange." Alex ignored the whispers. He walked to the next plant, a dark purple vine that moved like a snake. Its leaves had tiny spikes that could pierce skin, and its sap was green and oily. "Even this vine," Alex said, touching it carefully with the tip of his glove, "could be eaten if handled properly. You could boil it, neutralize the toxins, and have a meal. Or you could use it as a weapon. It depends on the purpose. That is why I asked the question. Virith studied him closely. Your perspective is unusual. Human. In our species, it is rare to consider the life of others, or even survival beyond combat. I have learned that survival is smarter than fighting, Alex said. A plant can save a life as easily as it can take one. Knowing both sides is important. Understanding only how to kill is dangerous. You may win battles, but you will lose everything if you cannot survive afterward. The hall was quiet now. The alien students were listening, not just to Alex, but to each other. Some of them began to look at the plants differently. They had been taught to see only weapons, but Alex was showing them another way. A plant could be more than a tool of war. Virith's fingers moved slowly in the air, gesturing to another plant, a tall one with glowing blue flowers. "And if you fail to survive?" he asked. His voice was low. "If you make a mistake? Human?" Alex smiled faintly. "Then you learn. Every plant has a way to survive it. If you know the rules. You cannot just fight. You have to think. That is what humans do. We survive in the most impossible conditions. You might find that useful." The murmurs grew louder. The aliens were not used to humans speaking like this. Many of them had never considered survival in the way humans did. Their lives were about strength, about dominance, about power. But Alex's words reminded them of something they had forgotten. Intelligence and caution could be stronger than sheer force. A young alien named Lyra, with pale yellow skin and wings folded behind her back, spoke up. "Do you mean to say that these plants can be used to eat, not just to kill?" "Yes," Alex said simply. "Everything has more than one use. You just need to think carefully and test it. A plant that is dangerous can also be helpful. You just have to respect it, not fear it blindly." Virith made a sound that was like a chuckle. "This is an interesting approach," he said. "Perhaps humans have some skill we have not understood. Perhaps there is value in seeing danger as opportunity, not just threat." Alex nodded. "That is all I am saying. If you know the purpose, you can decide how to use it. You can choose war, or you can choose life. But knowing both options is better than knowing only one." For the first time, the examination hall felt different. The tension that hung in the air, the nervousness, and the fear of failure seemed to fade slightly. The alien students began looking at the plants as Alex moved past them. Some of them picked up leaves carefully, smelled the petals, studied the thorns. They were curious now, not afraid. Alex noticed the change, but he stayed calm. He knew that his role here was not to show off, but to make them think. The aliens had the strength, the numbers, and the training. But humans had something else, adaptability. A human could survive where others would fail. Alex was showing them that. He reached a plant that looked like a small tree, but its bark was black and glossy. Its roots moved slowly across the floor. Alex knelt down and touched the roots. They recoiled slightly, like they sensed him, but did not attack. "Even this one," he said, "can be useful. The sap can heal wounds if prepared correctly. It can fight infections. And yes, it can kill if you are careless. That is why understanding is more important than fear." Virith moved closer, watching Alex's hands. "Most aliens would never touch it," he said. "They see only the danger. You see the possibility. That is what humans do," Alex said. "We survive on planets with no food, no water, and endless dangers. We find a way to turn danger into advantage. That is why I asked, for food or for war?" The alien students whispered among themselves again. Some looked inspired, others confused. Alex could feel the energy in the hall changing. The final exam was supposed to test knowledge of deadly plants. But now it was testing something else: intelligence, creativity, and the ability to see the world differently. Virith finally spoke. "Human, you have not answered the exam in the way we expected." But you have given us something more valuable. You have made us think. Active. Alex smiled faintly. That is all I hoped for. He stood up and looked around the hall. The glowing plants seemed less threatening now. More alive. More full of possibility. He knew that some aliens would still use them only for war. But some had seen another way. And that was enough for now. The bell rang, signaling the start of the timed examination. The alien students hurried to their stations, eager to show their knowledge of the toxic flora. Alex walked calmly to his station, examining the plants carefully. He did not rush. He knew the exam was not about speed, but understanding. As he prepared to begin, he noticed some aliens glancing at him with curiosity. They were asking questions quietly, trying to understand his perspective. Alex nodded to himself. Change was slow, but it had begun. In a galaxy that feared humans for their unpredictability, this small act of thinking differently was already a victory. He touched the first plant at his station, a small purple flower with spiked leaves. He studied it carefully, noting the color of the sap, the texture of the petals, and the sharpness of the spikes. For food or for war, he whispered to himself. The answer is both, if you know how. And with that thought, Alex began the exam not as a test of knowledge, but as a demonstration of humanity's greatest strength, the ability to survive, adapt, and turn danger into opportunity. The alien hall buzzed with movement and whispered questions, and Alex smiled faintly. He knew this was just the beginning. Alex Carter sat at his examination station, surrounded by floating terrariums filled with alien plants. The plants swayed gently, almost as if they were aware of his presence. He took a deep breath and examined the first one closely. Its petals were a deep, shiny blue, and tiny thorns lined the edges. He knew from the notes he had studied that this plant's sap could burn through most metals and harm any unprotected skin. Most of the alien students would panic if they accidentally touched it. Alex, however, did not feel fear. He felt curiosity. He carefully took out a small container and a pair of protective gloves. With slow, precise movements, he dipped his fingers into the sap, just enough to touch it lightly. Immediately, he felt the prickling heat on his gloves, but it did not burn through. He smiled faintly. Controlled exposure, he whispered to himself. It is not about avoiding danger, it is about understanding it. Across the hall, the other students watched him carefully. Some were whispering to each other. That human is not afraid, said one. A tall alien with silver skin and glowing eyes. He handles plants that could kill in seconds. Why is he so calm? Alex ignored them. He was focused on the plants. His mind worked differently from the others. He was not trying to show off, nor was he trying to compete. He wanted to understand. He wanted to know how these plants could help life, not just end it. That was the human way, thinking ahead, preparing for every possibility, and seeing value where others saw only danger. He moved to the next plant. A small tree with black bark and long roots that moved slowly across the floor. Its leaves were sharp, almost like tiny knives, and the sap glowed green in the light. Alex reached out carefully and touched one of the leaves with the tip of his glove. The leaf shivered, but did not attack. He examined it closely. This could be deadly if used wrong, he said quietly. But it could also save lives, if prepared correctly. He began to record notes in his small tablet. He wrote down the color of the sap, the smell of the leaves, the texture of the bark, and the shape of the roots. He made careful sketches of the plants, noting the parts that could be neutralized for food, and the parts that were only useful for defense. Every detail mattered. Virith, the proctor, moved closer, observing Alex. He had watched many students take this exam, and most of them focused only on the weaponized properties of the plants. Very few, if any, had thought about survival or alternative uses. Alex was different. His approach was calm, careful, and intelligent. Virith's antenna twitched slightly. Interesting, he muttered to himself. One alien student, a small creature with orange skin and 4 arms, leaned over to whisper to his neighbor. He treats the plants as if they are friends, not enemies. That is strange. Alex overheard the whisper but did not react. He knew that humans often looked for solutions, not just problems. He moved on to a vine that was coiled in a glass container. It had tiny spines along its length and released a faint blue mist when touched. Most aliens would recoil in fear. Alex smiled faintly and carefully wrapped a protective cloth around his hand. He reached out and touched the vine. The vine twitched but did not attack. Alex examined it and took a small sample of the mist. He held it up to the light, noting its color and consistency. This could be used for medicine, he said quietly. Or it could poison someone. It depends on how you use it. A few aliens were watching him more closely now. They were curious, not just about what he was doing, but about how he was thinking. One alien, with long, thin limbs and yellow eyes, whispered, "He sees the plants as tools, not weapons. That is unusual." Alex continued moving through the station, taking careful notes and recording his observations. He touched a plant that looked like a large red flower. Its petals were soft, but its pollen was toxic. He carefully used a small brush to collect a sample. "Even this," he said softly, "could be a food source if treated correctly. Or a weapon, if treated carelessly. Knowledge is the key." Virith watched silently. He had not expected a human to think like this. Most humans he had encountered were unpredictable, yes, but not careful and logical at the same time. Alex was a rare combination of curiosity, courage, and intelligence. Virith felt a strange sense of respect. Across the hall, some of the alien students were beginning to try things differently. They had always treated the plants as weapons, but now they were curious about other uses. One student carefully removed a small sample of sap from a plant and began experimenting, following Alex's method. Another student tried to examine a poisonous root without harming themselves. Alex had started something unexpected. He had changed the way they looked at danger. As the exam continued, Alex noticed one plant that seemed more dangerous than the others. Its trunk was dark purple, almost black, and it had long tendrils that moved like snakes. The leaves had tiny spikes, and the sap was thick and bright green. He knelt carefully and studied it. This plant could easily kill an unprotected alien in seconds. But Alex saw something else. He saw a potential source of nutrition, if handled properly. He carefully collected a small amount of the sap and mixed it with neutralizing chemicals he had prepared in advance. He worked slowly, step by step, explaining his process quietly to himself. The other students stopped to watch. They were fascinated by how calmly he worked, how he thought through every step. "Why do you bother?" whispered one alien to another. "It is dangerous. It is a test for killing knowledge, not for food." Alex heard the whisper but ignored it. He knew that seeing beyond the obvious was what humans did best. He worked carefully, neutralizing the toxic sap until it became a harmless, green paste. Then he carefully tasted a tiny bit, just enough to make sure it was safe. His eyes lit up. "It works," he said quietly. "It really works." Some of the alien students gasped. They had never seen anyone handle a plant like that and survive. A few whispered among themselves, amazed. Alex had shown them that knowledge and intelligence could overcome fear. The exam was supposed to test their ability to kill, but Alex had shown that understanding could save lives. Virith moved closer and watched Alex's work. "You are teaching them without speaking to them," he muttered. "Interesting." Alex continued moving through the other plants, taking notes, collecting samples, and testing them carefully. He was methodical patient, and precise. Every plant that could kill was studied not only for its danger but also for its potential benefit. Some alien students began copying his methods quietly, experimenting with small samples and testing carefully. By the middle of the exam, the hall had changed. The tense atmosphere was gone. The whispers of fear had turned into quiet murmurs of curiosity. The alien students were no longer only thinking about killing, they were thinking about understanding, survival, and possibility. Alex had done this without saying much. Simply by showing how humans approach challenges differently. Alex paused for a moment and looked around the hall. The plants glowed softly under the sunlight. Some of the alien students were starting to smile. A strange expression for their species. They were curious, thinking differently, imagining new possibilities. Alex felt a quiet satisfaction. This was what humans did. They adapted, they survived, and they taught others to see differently. Virith stepped closer. "Human, you are unusual," he said. "Most students would have failed this exam because they cannot think beyond their training. You are not only passing, you are teaching them." Alex shrugged slightly. "I did not come here to teach," he said simply. "I came to learn. But learning sometimes teaches others, whether you want it to or not." Virith considered this. "Your species has a strange way of thinking," he said, almost to himself. "You are small and weak, yet you survive in worlds where others fail. You are dangerous not because of strength, but because of your mind." Alex smiled faintly. "That is the human way." As the exam continued, Alex moved to a plant that resembled a small tree. Its bark was thick, almost like metal, and its roots moved slowly over the glass floor. The leaves were bright red, and the sap was oily and dark. He studied it carefully, noting every detail. "Even this could be a food source," he said quietly. "Or it could be a weapon. Knowing both sides is what matters." The alien students continued to watch him, some in awe, some in confusion. They were beginning to understand that there was more to surviving than strength or violence. Alex was showing them that intelligence, curiosity, and careful thinking could turn danger into opportunity. By the end of the first half of the exam, Alex had examined more plants than most students would in the entire session. He had collected samples, tested them, and recorded detailed notes. But more importantly, he had changed the way some of the alien students thought. They were curious now, thinking differently. Virith moved to the center of the hall and spoke to the students. "Observe the human," he said. "He approaches danger differently. He does not fear it blindly, nor does he rush to destroy it. He understands it. Perhaps there is value in this approach." Alex smiled quietly to himself. He knew that the exam was only part of the challenge. The real challenge was showing that humans could survive, think, and adapt in ways that others could not. This was how humans became strong in a galaxy full of dangers. As the bell rang, signaling a short break in the exam, Alex carefully cleaned his gloves and checked his notes. He looked around at the glowing plants, the observing aliens, and the proctor. For a small human, he was making a big impact. And in that quiet, glowing hall on Xylaris, Alex Carter realized something. Humans might be small and underestimated, but their minds could turn fear into curiosity, danger into opportunity, and survival into victory. Alex Carter returned to his station after the short break. The hall was quieter now, but the air was still buzzing with curiosity. The alien students were no longer just observers, they were beginning to try small experiments of their own. Some picked up leaves carefully, others examined sap, all trying to mimic the careful precision Alex had shown. He smiled faintly. Humans had a way of making others think differently, without forcing them. Alex focused on a new plant, one he had not studied closely before. It was a tall shrub with silver leaves that glowed faintly in the dim light. The leaves were jagged, and a soft mist rose from the base. According to his notes, This plant could cause hallucinations in almost any species if touched directly. Most alien students would have avoided it completely, fearing instant disorientation. Alex, however, saw opportunity. He carefully wrapped his gloved hand in a protective covering and gently touched one of the lower leaves. The mist swirled around his hand, but he felt no dizziness. Instead, he studied the texture of the leaves, the shape of the veins, and the pattern of the mist. "If you handle it slowly," he said quietly, "this plant could be used as medicine. A small dose could calm stress or pain. A large dose could incapacitate enemies. Understanding is everything." Virith watched from the front of the hall. His antenna twitched, showing his interest. "The human understands balance," he muttered to himself. "Most species see only danger or power." One alien student, a tall creature with blue scales and sharp claws, whispered to another, "He is not just clever. He is teaching us without words. Look at how careful he is." Alex moved to another plant. A small red bush with bright flowers. Its petals were soft, but its roots were poisonous. He knelt and examined the roots closely. "Many of you think this plant is only for killing," he said softly, though most of the students could hear him. "But if you boil the roots and remove the toxins, it becomes a nutritious food. That is how humans survive in dangerous environments." A few students began to experiment quietly with small samples, following his method. They were still cautious, but they were learning. Alex had changed their perspective. For centuries, these alien species had trained only to kill or avoid danger. But now they were beginning to see plants as tools for survival as well. Alex noticed a problem with one of the floating terrariums. A vine had grown too close to the glass edge and was pressing against it. If it broke, the vine could lash out at anyone nearby. Without hesitation, he reached out carefully, guiding the vine back into the center of the container. The other students gasped. Most would have waited for someone stronger to handle it. Alex handled it with calm precision. "Human," Virith called out. "You do not fear danger. You manage it." Alex shrugged slightly. "Fear does not help. Understanding helps." He moved on to a plant that looked like a small tree with black bark and thick branches. Its sap was bright yellow and extremely acidic. Most aliens would have recoiled, but Alex examined it carefully. He took a small sample and placed it in a neutralizing solution he had prepared earlier. He stirred it slowly, watching as the bright yellow liquid turned pale and harmless. "Even this," he said quietly, "could help life. It can kill, yes, but it can also heal, if handled carefully. Knowing the difference is what matters." Across the hall, the alien students were beginning to whisper excitedly to each other. Some were trying the neutralizing methods Alex had shown. Others were examining plants more closely than they ever had before. Alex had done more than answer the exam. He had changed the way they thought about life, danger, and survival. Alex noticed a small group of aliens struggling with a particularly dangerous plant. Its leaves were sharp, its roots moved like snakes, and its sap glowed red under the sunlight. Most of the students were afraid to touch it. Alex walked over quietly. "Move slowly," he said softly. "Observe first, then handle carefully. Fear will make you careless. Curiosity will save you." The students watched as he carefully lifted a leaf with his gloved hand. He guided them step by step, showing how to handle it safely. The plant did not attack. The students followed his instructions and began to understand. Their nervous movements became careful and precise. Alex had not done the work for them. He had shown them how to think. Virith stepped closer, observing the group. "Humans," he said quietly, "teach without force. They show, and others learn. Perhaps that is why they survive so well in dangerous worlds." Alex moved to the next plant. a glowing purple vine that released a faint blue mist. The mist was toxic in large amounts, but in small doses, it could stimulate the nervous system. Alex carefully took a sample and mixed it with a neutralizing agent. "This could be medicine," he said. "It could help a wounded soldier recover faster, or it could paralyze an enemy. Understanding both uses is the key." A few students were now taking notes eagerly. They had never thought about plants this way. The exam had been meant to test knowledge of killing, but Alex had shown them that knowledge could be about life as well. The room buzzed with quiet excitement and curiosity. Alex paused for a moment and looked around. He saw alien students working together, sharing ideas, and experimenting carefully. He saw young aliens smiling for the first time during this exam. And he realized something important. Humans were underestimated, not because they were weak, but because others did not understand their way of thinking. Humans survived not through strength, but through intelligence, adaptability, and careful observation. He moved to a new plant, a small orange flower with spiked leaves and a poisonous sap. Most students would have avoided it, but Alex examined it carefully. He took a small amount of sap and mixed it with neutralizing chemicals. He tasted a tiny drop to ensure it was safe. "It works," he said quietly. "Even danger can be useful if you understand it." One student, a pale green alien with 4 eyes, whispered to a friend, "He is teaching us how to survive, not just how to fight. That is different." Alex continued moving through the hall, taking samples, testing them, and showing careful methods. He worked slowly, deliberately, and with attention to detail. Each step was safe, each action calculated. The alien students watched and began to understand. The plants that were meant to be fearsome had lost some of their intimidation under Alex's careful hands. Virith watched closely, impressed. Most students would have rushed, panicked, or ignored the subtleties. You take time, you observe, you think. That is why you succeed where others would fail. Alex smiled faintly. "That is what humans do," he said softly. "We survive in worlds where others cannot. We turn danger into opportunity, and fear into understanding." As the exam continued, Alex came to the final plant at his station. It was a large, dark green bush, with long, moving roots and sharp, glowing leaves. Its sap was thick and purple, extremely poisonous. Most alien students would have avoided it completely. Alex knelt carefully and examined the roots. "Even this plant," he said quietly, "has value. It can kill, yes, but it can also feed, heal, and protect. It depends on knowledge, caution, and respect." He carefully collected a small sample of sap, neutralized it, and examined the leaves for edible parts. He worked slowly, methodically, and precisely. The other students were now watching with a mixture of awe and respect. They had never seen anyone handle this much danger and succeed so calmly. Virith stepped closer and observed the process. "Humans," he said quietly, "do not rely on brute strength. They rely on observation, calculation, and care. Perhaps that is why they thrive." Alex finished his examination and stood quietly. He had completed the tasks, but more importantly, he had shown the alien students a new way of thinking. They had learned that danger could be understood, that fear could be controlled, and that knowledge could turn deadly plants into tools for life. As the bell rang, signaling the end of the exam, Alex carefully cleaned his gloves and collected his notes. The alien students were buzzing with quiet excitement. Some were whispering to each other, trying to repeat his methods. Some were examining plants they had previously ignored. Alex had changed their perspective without even intending to. Virith stepped forward and addressed the hall. "Observe the human," he said. "He does not fear. He does not rush. He understands. That is a strength many of us do not possess. Perhaps this is a lesson we should all remember. Alex smiled faintly. He knew that humans were often underestimated in the galaxy. But moments like this showed why humans survived. Intelligence, careful observation, adaptability, and courage could outweigh strength, numbers, and fear. He had completed the exam, but he had also completed something more important. He had shown that humans could change the way others thought, simply by being themselves. As he walked out of the examination hall, Alex looked at the glowing plants and the curious faces of the alien students. He knew that this was just the beginning. The galaxy was full of dangers, full of unknown worlds and unknown creatures. But humans had a way of surviving, a way of turning threats into opportunities, and that was something no alien species could easily match. And so, Alex Carter, a single human in a hall of aliens, walked calmly through the glowing corridors of Xylaris Academy, leaving a quiet mark on the minds of those who had doubted him.